I'm so excited about this session. And as she'll explain more about her, but from RMIT and Number Doctors has got such great, fabulous insights and information into the early years with number. So thanks. I'm going to give you a clap from here, and thank you very much for joining us.
Thanks, Alan. Thanks, everyone. I'm excited to be here. And as Alan mentioned, my name is Dr. Ange Rogers, if you haven't met me before. I started out my life, or not particularly my life, but my career as a primary school teacher and leader at St Monica's in Moonee Ponds. I then went on maternity leave and did a PhD in maths education, and I've done a bit of consulting. I've had 4 children along the way, and I currently work part-time at RMIT as a pre-service teacher lecturer, where I teach them about how to implement maths in their classroom, and I love doing that. And basically, I love teaching and talking about maths. So let's get started, I think. So basically, I just wanted to do a bit of putting into context what's been happening, because it's been crazy times for all of you teachers and me as well at uni. Trying to teach maths online is not easy. So I feel for you as well out there. I'm trying to teach the uni students how to teach maths, and you guys are trying to teach students how to understand maths, and it's not easy. But let's look at the positives. So basically, parents have had an opportunity to engage in the maths that we teach. So it's given them an insight to what goes on at school, which many of them haven't had before. So I think that's a positive. We as teachers appreciate the importance of hands-on learning now, because, we can't do it. So we realise how critical it is. We've learned to adapt our teaching. So, you guys have done an amazing job, the way that you've adapted and been flexible in the way that you've presented your maths teaching. I know that through my children at home. It's just been amazing what schools have come up with and teachers have come up with, so good on you. Some students have had one-to-one support from parents, so that's something that they wouldn't normally have in a classroom. Some of them have had no support, but others have had a parent right there next to them helping them, so that's a positive in some ways. And we miss our students. That's a positive, because we realise that this is what we really love doing, having interactions with students, and they miss us. I know my 2 girls who are school age, they just desperately want to get back to school to see their teachers and their friends. But so I'm thinking they're some of the positives that have come out. Then there's the other side to it, obviously, the reality. So differentiation is near impossible in an online environment. I know you've all done your best to do that, I'm sure, but it's just so hard when we're not sitting right next to them or hearing, the discussion and their thinking. It's so hard to differentiate. The differences between groups of students will widen. So there's research to show that is what will happen in remote learning, that the differences between the groups will just get bigger. Those lower ones will be even further behind than they were before. Almost no hands-on learning is happening. Now, I know some schools have sent packs home. They've got some resources for children, which is fantastic, but compared to what we usually do, it's been very little hands-on learning, especially for the juniors. Different schools have taken different approaches. So some have focused on measurement and geometry in those areas. Others have focused on number. So it's completely thrown out our curriculum, basically, because you're spending a lot longer on some things that you probably wouldn't spend that long on normally. So it's just sort of messed up the way that we normally would teach a year. Parents are not really seeing our best practice. There's probably more worksheets than we usually would be using in a classroom setting, and videos, which can be fantastic, but it's not what we do in a classroom usually. It's a little bit probably not our best side. So that's a bit disappointing that parents are seeing that. Parents who've got that question, are they helping or are they hindering? Some of them are doing a great job and they're trying their hardest, absolutely. But you have to ask, especially ones that are quite anxious about maths. The research shows us that if a parent is anxious about maths, they pass that on to their children just through helping them, trying to help them with homework. So that's interesting. You know, we're going to have to deal with that when they come back to school. Parent-child work sample. You know, you set a task. Who's doing the task? Is it the child or is it the parent? You don't. And we've had very little conversation or peer interaction. So, and I know it's different at every school, but compared to what they would have in a classroom setting, they're just not having that conversation that they would in a maths class, which is critical to develop that understanding. So there's some of the things that are issues probably with remote learning, but we're all doing our best. So we just have to acknowledge that that's what's happened and then think about, okay, what are we going to do about it? So what do we do for the rest of 2020? So basically, I think we assume that not much has been learnt in remote learning because, you know, whatever has been learnt is a bonus. So we sort of go with the thought that not much has been learnt, and then when they get back to school, if they get back to school, we obviously need to start with assessment to find out, you know, that formative assessment to find out where they're at and then teach from that point. But we've got to focus on the critical knowledge because when we get back to school, we might only have a couple of weeks with them next term perhaps, or maybe not even. So we've got to really focus on the critical knowledge in F2, and that's what I'm going to talk about tonight. So the big ideas, if they're not in place, and Di Seaman, who was my my supervisor for my PhD, and I've worked very closely with her, she talks about the big ideas and how important they are. If they're not in place, everything becomes more difficult. And I like this image here that's on the screen. Don't let your big rocks, i.e. what's important to you, get crowded by the little stuff in life. That's the same in maths. So we've got to put the big rocks in first, the big ideas, the things that are really important, so that all the little things will fit in around it. If we focus on all the little tasks, you know, for example, in the upper year levels, if we focus on area and we spend a lot of time on that, then, you know, if we've neglected multiplicative thinking, then area isn't going to make sense to those students. Okay, so that little idea of area won't fit in because we haven't worked on the big idea of multiplicative thinking. So just think about, we've got to get the big stones in place and then we can catch up on the little stuff later. Okay, so the critical concepts, the 6 critical concepts that I'm going to run through tonight, 2 of them probably aren't really concepts, so just bear that in mind, but there's 6 areas that we're going to focus on tonight. So counting, subitising, comparing numbers, part, whole, growth mindset and reasoning. And you've got your workbook that has all of those headings and you can take notes as we go through each one. So I'm going to start with counting. So there's 4 elements to counting, which we all know. So we've got the number naming sequence. So they need to know those numbers in order. Like the song of counting. Okay, so they just need to know them all in order, and that's the first thing that they need to know when they learn to count. So that can start for some children, you know, when they're 2 or 3 years old. For others who have not had those experiences at home, then it might be at the start of foundation when they're coming to learn that number naming sequence. They've got to have one-to-one correspondence. So giving each object that they count one number name. They've also got to understand that the last number tells us how many there are in the whole collection. So that's the cardinal principle. So that's very unique to counting because if you think about a collection of, say, Smarties, and I say, oh, there's a red one, there's a yellow one, and there's a green one, the fact that I said that green one last doesn't mean anything or doesn't have anything to do with the whole collection. But in counting, if I say there's 1, 2, 3, that last number tells us something about the group. It tells us how many are in the group. So it's a unique feature of counting that the last number tells us how many are in the collection. And that takes a while for children to understand that, and lots of experiences with counting. They also have to understand conservation of number, so that 3 is 3 no matter how it looks. So they might have 3 items and they're close together, and then you might spread them out and you say, okay, how many are there now? If they have to recount them, that means they don't trust the count and they don't have that conservation of number because they think it's taking up more space, so it must be a different number. Okay, so they've really got to be strong in all 4 of those areas before we consider them a proficient counter. Okay, so some of the counting ideas that I wanted to share with you today, we really need them to be counting daily. Okay, so prep to 2, have them, even if it's in remote learning, doing counting every day. Okay, so think about different contexts to do with counting. So things that they can move, so things that they can physically move themselves. So Lego, toys, spoons, pasta, going out and collecting some blades of grass, playing cards, actually just counting how many cards there are, bricks on the wall, pegs in the peg box, jigsaw pieces, like their parents might have a 500-piece jigsaw puzzle at home. Ask them to count, a collection from that. Things that they can't move. So getting them to count things like trees and flowers, buttons on the TV remote. Set one of those things a day for them to do. Go out and count how many trees you can see, or flowers, or give them things that they can't actually move, because that's actually requiring a different skill to the one above where they can physically move them. Things that move. So getting them to count maybe the cars that go past their house, the birds that fly past, the people that are in their house, counting their own steps. So maybe asking them to step from their front door to their back door of their house and getting them to count those steps, because that's difficult as well, because they've got to count, they've got to step, and they've got to do that one-to-one correspondence. So there's a lot of coordination that's required for that. Counting claps. How many claps can you do in 20 seconds, or just or just clap 25 times, and they've got to keep track of that. Movement, so hopping, how many times can you hop in a minute? Can you hop 20 times in a row? Okay, giving them challenges like that. And as I said, bringing in time. So, can you do something for 20 seconds, or can you do something for a minute? So they're counting, there's time involved, you're covering quite a few different things in the one activity. Having different orientations as well is important. So having the items in a circle, for example, often they don't know how to deal with the things that are in a circle, because they just keep going round and round and round. So they have to organise that count, having things in a line to count, having things in random orientations, and discussing with them how they're going to make sure that they don't double count things. Keeping tallies. So, if you're counting the number of cars that go past your house, keeping a tally of that and then turning that into a graph might be something that those older, the year 2s could be doing. Getting them to count a large collection. Okay, so as I said, getting a pasta out, getting the jigsaw pieces out, they're having to organise that into groups. So break it down into groups and then count the groups, and they might use skip counting there. So say they've got a group of 80 jigsaw piece puzzles, they put it into groups of 2 maybe, and then they've got to do their skip counting by 2s. Or they might put it in groups of 10, and they've got to do their skip counting by 10s. So that gives them practice organising a large collection, which is important. One of the great activities that you might like to try, and Alan has got the link to this at the moment, is Steve Wyboney's Etsy Mysteries. He does some fantastic resources, and if you haven't seen these, you can give them sort of one a day, and it's just, you can see the picture on the screen there, and basically it's just a picture that he's taken, and then there's clues that come up on the side for children to guess what the number is. Okay, so it's honing in on that estimation and those skills in working out how many items are in whatever jar it is. So they're really fantastic and lots of fun. I read something the other day which was a really good analogy, the difference between guessing and estimating. So guessing is if you go in and you've got a sauce bottle in your cupboard, you pull out the sauce bottle and you have no idea how much sauce is in there. Is there going to be enough to cover your hamburger? You don't know. So you just make a complete guess because you can't see how much sauce is in there. But if you pick up the sauce bottle and you shake it and you try and pour it out, you can then make an estimate of how much is in there. Okay, so that's the difference between guessing, where you've got no information at all, you're just making a random guess, and estimating, where you're using the information that you have to make informed choices. Okay, and that's what these SD mysteries are encouraging. Okay, so these are just some of the contexts that I've done with counting. So you've got counting toys, you've got counting steps, you've got looking out the window, we've got things, the pegs up the top are in a circle, so that makes it difficult. You've got down the bottom counting pegs, you've got counting flowers, you've got counting, the items in the washing basket. All of these things are around the house, and so you can encourage the students to be doing them while they're on remote learning. Okay, so counting on and counting back are some of the skills that are related to counting that we also need to be working on, because they are our foundations for addition and subtraction. So we want them to be locking in the number and then counting on. So say we're counting on from 7, we want them to be starting at 7 and breaking that sequence, and then starting 7, 8, 9, 10, and same counting back. So we might say start at 14 and count back. So they've got to have that 14 in their mind and then count backwards from there. Skip counting, as I said, always link it to a collection. Okay, so it's not so much about learning off by heart 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. That is important, but it's also important that they know that that is linked to a collection. Okay, so that they're counting objects. So as I said, they've got the big collection of objects like you would in a game of chicken scramble. Chicken scramble is just having, you play it in your classroom, you have all the children around the sitting around, and then you have a collection of counters or lima beans in the centre, and each child has to come in and grab a whole collection of lima beans, and then they have to order that count. So they could be doing that at home with whatever they have. You just say, okay, everyone bring a big collection of whatever, and then they have to order that count and explain to you how they've ordered it. I put them in tens, and then I skip counted by tens, and I had 47 or whatever it is. So this is just a video that I made of me doing some counting for chicken scramble. So it was like they had to watch this video and then explain what the person in the video was doing and why they thought they were doing that. So just have a look at this. There's no sound to this. So just showing a video like that and getting the children to discuss that and talk about what do they think that person was doing, and then getting them to count their own collection. They don't have to use counting by tens, they could use a different strategy, but it just sparks their interest and gets them thinking about different ways to organise a count. Okay, another one is procedure writing. So this was a prep activity that I did, and I got them to write a procedure about how to count. Okay, so they just had to describe, and it made them stop and think about actually how do you count, because I had to describe it to someone else, obviously. So that might be something that you want to use. There's another game that I really like that Peter Sullivan talks about called Keep the Count. So I'll just show you this video now, and this is Keep the Count.
1, 2, 3, 2, 1, 0, 2, 3, 4, 5, 3, 2, 1.
Okay, so we're just moving the counters in and out, and they're having to keep the count. So we're counting forwards, we're counting backwards, we're doing groups of more than one, and so they're keeping the count. So that's a nice simple activity. this one is using MAB, so for the older children. And I'll just move it forward because it's about here that we actually play. Oh, hang on, sorry. It's about there. What's that one?
100.
And then the next student?
200.
200. The next student?
300.
Very good, boys. Okay, then I'll put that in for the next student.
301.
And the next one?
302.
Okay. And then if I could do two at a time, so what am I up to now?
322.
Good. And then if it's a student who I think is ready to work with thousands as well, so I might add the 1,000 block in. So what's that for? What?
322.
1,322. Good. Okay, next student.
1,332.
Good. And then I could also put in two at a time. So what are we up to now?
1,343.
Good. And also you can take them out as well. So you take that out for the next student.
1,332.
Okay. So
And there's a few questions in the chat box. So after you finish your explanation, we might there's a couple of questions out there.
Yep. So basically, that's a game that works really well in a classroom where you've got everyone sitting around in a circle, and then you're sitting in the centre as a teacher with the MABs with you, and you're moving them in and out for each child as you go around. So you can really differentiate it quite easily because, you know, some children you'll put maybe 1,000 in, others you'll put, you know, only one in just because that's where they're at with their counting. So, yeah, that's what, Ellen, was there questions there?
One question was there a question from Benjamin O'Connor saying, is that from the LAF from DIE? So one of the things you talked about from your LAF.
Chicken scramble is, yep. Is that what he meant? Yeah.
And yeah, the other option is when you're playing the video, can you put the sound up a little bit more by any chance? The sound's coming through softly. Otherwise, it's all the way. We'll just have to be really quiet and listen. That's all.
Yeah, I don't think I can. Yeah, I think it's the videos. They're just a bit, yeah. But usually I'll explain what happens anyway, just in case. Yeah. Okay. Okay. So the next one that we're up to is Subitising. And Subitising is a relatively new concept in the maths education world, especially in the Western maths education world. And it's very important for visualising quantities. Now, the thing is, Subitising, we know what it is, or most of us should, because it's in the curriculum, but parents don't, okay? They have no idea what this concept is. They've not heard the word before. So we really need, particularly in this time of remote learning, to be explaining what it is and why we're doing it so that they can be on board with us. So Subitising, there's two types of Subitising. You've got perceptual Subitising, which is the instant recognition of objects up to 5 without counting. And then you've got conceptual Subitising, which is recognising smaller parts and adding them together. So if you were to look at this flashcard, you could just recognise that as 4 straight away because we have that ability to see that that is 4 because we can see up to 5 without having to break it down. We could break it down, and that's what we want students to do when they're learning it. So they might break it down as 2 and 2, but pretty much up to 5 you should be able to, as an adult, just go, yeah, that's 4. But something like this, you need to break that down into maybe a 4 and a 5 you might see. Okay, so that's conceptual Subitising, and that relates to part whole because you're breaking the 9 down into 4 and 5. Okay, so that's really important as well. So some Subitising activities. I like 5s frames because that's a great place to start. Also dice. I think it's super important that all our foundation students are able to recognise all the dice patterns. So right at the start of the year, I always send home, if they don't know their dice patterns, I send a dice home with them and ask their parents to work on that through games. And I'll show you some games that you can work on that with. But fives frames are the next step. And basically you can work with fives frames and hands because we've got 5 fingers on a hand. But it's important to link the 5 frame if you're using them with other objects. So when I say 5 fingers, if I've got a 5s frame that shows, and you can see it on the screen there, that it's got 3 in it, I might say to the children, okay, can you show me 3? So they put up 3 fingers, and then you have to say to them, you've got to link it by saying things like, oh, okay, you've got 3 fingers up. That's like the 3 dots on the 5s frame. What are the 2 fingers that are down? What's that like? And then you can say, oh, they're like the, hopefully they'll say they're like the two spaces. So you can make those connections between hands, 5s frames, and even, you know, between collections like this, you can talk about how they all relate. So that's important that we're making those connections between different materials. Bunny Ears is one of my favourite games to play with the youngsters, and you can easily play this on a Zoom type, you know, remote learning platform. So basically just saying a number and then getting the child to, or the children to show you that number. So 2, you know, 4, okay, 6, can you show me another way? 3 and 3 is 6. I could have done 4 and 2 as 6. So getting them to play that game and then having discussions about, oh, okay, you know, Tom, you've got 4 and 2 up, and somebody else has got 3 and 3. So they're seeing that there's different ways that they can make numbers, and that's where the part whole links in to that game as well. Dot plates. I've got, where are my dot plates? So I've got my dot plates, and I often used to do these when there was, you know, 5 minutes to go before the bell at the end of the day if I'm in the class. But if I'm doing remote learning, you know, this could be a 5-minute activity that you could do every day. Just run through a selection of dot plates with dots on them, or you could get the children to make their own dot plates if they wanted to too. So these are some of the more difficult ones for the grade 2s that I would do, but just, you know, simple ones for the foundation students is where I started. Tenzi is one of my favourite games to play to encourage children to learn their dice patterns. So this is Tenzi. So it's a like a commercial game that you can buy, but you can play the same game. We always have lots of dice in classrooms, so you can play the same game without buying the actual Tenzi game. But I'll just show you, there's a free app for Tenzi, which is a fantastic resource that you can use, and I'll just show that my daughter playing it here. So I'll move this out of the way. And again, if you can't hear the sound properly, it's not that big a deal because it's more that you're watching what's happening. Basically, Tenzi is you roll 10 dice and then you've got to choose one of the numbers, for example, 5, and then you've got to try and keep rolling till all the dice show the number 5, okay? So it's really great for Subitising, getting them to know those dice patterns. So you can watch that here.
I have to do it. You can't just watch yourself on video. Oh, you got 5. Come on. Well done. I like the way you're doing 5.
I was hiding.
Watch on the screen. Good girl. There's one more on that one. Yeah, good girl. Oh, there's one on.
Okay, so you get the idea of that app. It's a really fun one and great for those preppies who are learning their dice patterns. The other app that I really like is this one on the screen here called Subitise Flashcards. Again, it's free and they use lots of different materials. So they use hands, they use dominoes, they use cards, which is nice because that's important in Subitising, that we're using different materials to represent the numbers, so they're seeing different ones. So check that one out as well. Oops. Okay, the next one we're looking at is, or the next concept is comparing numbers. So comparing is important as it allows children to understand where numbers fit together. Okay, so we want them to develop that mental number line in their mind of where numbers fit. Okay, and they get better and better at that as they get more experience with numbers. We want them to be familiar with vocab like more and less. Usually more they pick up very quickly. I know my 12-month-old son, that was his first word, more, because he just wanted more food. So they become very familiar with more. Less isn't used as often, it's used less, ironically. So you may have to do more work with less with children, understanding that vocabulary, especially if you've got ESL students. Before and after is another really important language vocab that you need to work on, that they understand what those words mean. Larger and smaller, there's a whole lot of, in early maths, those words that they need lots and lots of experience with in different contexts to understand fully. Equals means same as, so when we talk about equals, we don't need to use that formal symbol in foundation, but we can just say, 3 and 2 is the same as 4 and 1, okay? And knowledge of quantity and where numbers fit, as I said earlier. Okay. Okay, so just some quick comparing activities that you might like to try. Bingo, and I think bingo works really well in an online environment as well. So getting the children to write out 6 numbers, say between 1 and 10 if you're working with preps, larger if you've got grade 2s or grade 1s, and then you just saying more or less statements. So, cross out your number, or cross out one number if it is less than 6. Okay, so if they've got a number less than 6, they can cross out one of them. Cross out one number if it is more, if you've got one that is more than 9. Okay, so just using less and more statements, keep it really simple. It's a really simple game to play. Bingo. Guess my number. Again, they're guessing your number, but they're having to use more and less statements. So is your number more than 25? Is your number less than 30? So they're just having to narrow it down using more or less. Card compare. So basically, this is a game that we play at home actually, which my children love. And basically what each child flips a card, and the person with the largest card gets a counter or gets a point, okay? So we just keep playing, each round, every person flips a card and whoever's got the largest. So there's lots of comparing going on there, and they don't even know that they're doing that. And then we have a magic round where you can look at your cards. So everybody puts their card down, and in your magic round, so I might be round 7, so the 7th time we play it, I get to look at my cards after everyone's put theirs down and then choose the card that I want to put down. So I can, if I've got the right cards, I can, take control of the game and win it. So it's not so much chance, but that's just a simple game that you can play with cards. Which one is closer? So basically this is a simple one again, just getting them with cards, having 2 cards, spread out, and then they have to pick another card. So maybe they pick the number 4, and then you say, okay, is 4 closer to 2 or is it closer to 9? Okay, so just getting them to compare those numbers, think about a number line, think about where everything fits, and trying to put it all in perspective. This is for the older children, so you might have 100 and 300, and then give them a number somewhere in the middle. You might have 150. Which one is 150 closer to? Okay, so they're doing that comparing as they're thinking about those the magnitude of those numbers. Okay, so we're up to part whole now. This is probably the most critical thing that you need to focus on. And when I talk about part whole, it relates to Subitising, because we talked about how, you know, when you're Subitising, you actually, especially when you're doing that conceptual Subitising, you are breaking it down like you do for part whole. Okay, so part whole is recognising the numbers 1 to 10 in terms of their parts. So knowing that 8 is 5 and 3, 6 and 2, that it's double 4. But this is also important because this is something that we forget sometimes, that it's also that number's relationship to larger and smaller numbers and to 10. Okay, so they need to know that 8 is 1 less than 9. So you can hear that less language coming in there. It's 1 more than 7. It's 2 less than 10. So and how they relate to 10. Sometimes we focus on those tens facts, and we, you know, try and drill them into the students so that they're particularly important, and they are, but it's just as important that they know all of the relationships for every one of those numbers up to 10. Okay, so not just the tens facts, they also need to know all the relationships for 8 and 7 and 6. So that's critical. It comes into multiplication. If they don't know their part whole, then they can't use some of the multiplication strategies that we teach in year 3 and 4. For example, if you're doing 7 times 6, you can use a strategy where you do 5 times 6 plus 2 times 6. If you don't know that 7 is made up of 5 and 2, then that strategy doesn't work for you. Okay, so it has lots of implications with fractions, with addition, with subtraction, all the way through if they don't get that in foundation. You've really got to teach it systematically. So within each number, so say I'm looking at the number 4, you've got to be systematic in the way you teach it. You know, I want them to know 0 and 4, I want them to know 3 and 1, I want them to know 2 and 2, and then think about how you're going to help them learn that. And then you've got to be systematic across the numbers up to 10 as well. So, okay, who knows their part whole for 4? Great, tick that off. Who knows their part whole for 5? So this comes back to your assessment. You really need to be clear on what each child knows in their part whole, because by the end of foundation or year 1, you want every one of them, preferably by the end of foundation, you want every one of your children to be fluent with those part whole relationships for the numbers up to 10. Okay, so this is an example of 8, all of the things that we want them to know about 8 to understand part whole. So 8 is 2 less than 10, it's 6 and 2 more, it's 4 and 4. So notice we're not saying 4 plus 4, we're just using that informal language of 4 and 4. Double 4, 3 and 3 and 2. So it's not always just 2 relationships, it can be 3, so 3 and 2. 5 and 3, 3 and 5, and 2 less than 10. So all of those things they have to know to be understanding the part whole for 8. So that's a lot to know. This is a video of my daughter when she was at the end of foundation, and we've done a lot of work on part whole because I know how critical it is. And this was her telling me all the things she knew about the number 4. So I just want to share this with you so that you realise how much thinking is involved in understanding each of these numbers in this depth.
Okay, can you tell me about 4?
Yes. 4 is 2 and 2. 4 is 3 and 1. 4 is 1 and 3. 4 is 0 and 4. 4 is 4 and 0.
What about with these counters? Can you show me?
4 is 2 and 2. 4 is 3 and 1. 4 is 1 and 3. 4 is 0 and 4. 4 is 0 and 4. 4 is in between. 3 and 5. 4 is after 3. 4 is before 5. 4 is an even number, not an odd number, because these two go together and these two go together. These two could go together as well. 4 is a very good number because you can make the cross with it, sign of the cross with it.
Right. Thank you.
Okay, so hopefully,
Can you tell
sorry,
me
it's
about
playing again. Hopefully you can, you got the picture there of how much there is for them to know just for each of the numbers, okay? And it's really important that we give them lots of experiences so that they can put all those things together and know them without having to think about them. They're just, you know, it's all there in their mind. They have a mental object of the number 4 and they can pull out all of these ideas to do with 4. So if you're a foundation teacher, that's something to focus on definitely for the rest of this year. And even year 1 and 2s, maybe this is something that you can check. You know, how is your part whole? Check for your class who has got particular numbers that they need to work on, because by the end of grade 2, it's going to start impacting them if they don't know this. Okay, we really want them by the end of prep. If not halfway through year 1, we want them part whole to be up and running for all of those numbers to 10. These are 2 great books that I really like reading when I'm talking about part whole with my class. Ducks Away is one that looks at part whole for the numbers 5 up to for the number 5. There's 5 ducks. 4 are on the bridge up the top, 1's down below, and then 3 are on the top of the bridge and 2 are down below. So it looks at those combinations. If you want, on YouTube, if you Google Emma Wiggle reads Ducks Away, so that's a really great resource to share. And 10 for me looks at all the patterns, all the relationships, for the number 10. I meant to say in that video of my daughter, she did leave one thing out, and I spoke to her about that later. No, I didn't. She left out the fact, how is 4 related to the number 10? So I just had to check later whether she had that understanding of that 4 is 6 away from 10, okay? Because remember, that's what part whole is. It's not just about all the relationships, it's how they relate to other numbers and to 10. Okay, so here are some part whole activities. Bunny ears I've talked about. So, but when you're teaching part whole with bunny ears, you're really focusing on those different combinations and saying, okay, 4, okay, make 4 in another way. Okay, make 4 in another way. And whoops, that wasn't 4, 3 and 1. But really, that's what you're focusing on when you've got that with the part whole focus for bunny ears. Shut the Box is one of my favourite card games to play. I'll show you a video of that in a second. But I just wanted to show you, especially for the grade 2 teachers, Ken puzzles are a great resource to have or to use for part whole. So, yep, and Ellen's right onto it. She's put the link in for the website. There's also an app for this as well. But basically what you have to do, so 3 plus, and what you have to do is put in 2 numbers that add together to make 3. So it might be 2 and 1. You put in these these top 2 squares at the top, but the square underneath the 3 says 1, so that has to be 1. And then down the bottom you've got 5 plus, so these 2 squares down the bottom have to add up to 5. So in a 3 by 3 grid like this, you're only allowed to use the numbers 1, 2 and 3, and you can't have numbers repeated downways or repeated across. Okay, but it's great for part whole because they've got to think of the different ways that they can make each of the numbers. So if you're looking for a challenge, especially for your year 2s, Ken puzzles are fantastic. Okay, so I'm going to show you Shut the Box now. Basically, we have bought a board game, we've bought this on eBay for, I think it was $20, and because we love the game Shut the Box so much, but for quite a while we just played with cards. So you don't need to have this. You can just play with 2 dice and the cards 1 to 10. Okay, so each player has to have the cards 1 to 10 in front of them. And what you have to do is roll 2 dice. Say it comes up with a 3 and a 5. I would put down, so if it's a 3 and a 5, I could put down 3 and 5, or I could put down, because 3 and 5 equal 8, I could put down the 8, or I could put down 6 and 2, okay, or 7 and 1. So there's different combinations, but it has to equal what I rolled with the dice, which was 8. So you can see that how the part whole comes in there, because they have to think of all the combinations that equal 8, and the object of the game is to try and get as many of these down, and you keep rolling. So if I put down, say, 7 and 1, I would roll again. Maybe it came up with a 6 and a 3, so I might put down 9, whoops, and then I keep going until I can't put down any more, okay? So I'll show you a video of us playing that game, but as I said, you don't need this. You can just play it with cards and dice in your classroom. Okay, here's Shut the Box.
Yeah. 9, 6, I'm going to go 4 and 2. 6, I'm going to go 6, 3, that's 9, 5 and 3 and 1. And 9, no, I can't do anything. So my score is 7 plus 8, which is 15. Your turn.
6. I'm going to do 6. 7. We'll do 7. 8. I'll do 5 and 3. 4. I'll do 4.
Okay, I'll stop it there because you get the idea. But the winner is the person with the lowest score. So then strategy comes into it, because you want to get your bigger numbers away first. So lots and lots of part, whole, and Subitising as well, because you've got the dice in there too. Okay, so we're up to growth mindset now. We really want to encourage children to have a growth mindset in maths. It's super important, because all the research has shown how it holds them back if they have a fixed mindset in maths. It holds them back from their learning. So we have to think about that idea of what is a maths person, and we want to put out the message that everyone's a maths person. Everyone can learn maths. It's not that you're good at maths or you're bad at maths. It's just that some people have had more experience with maths. So if you think of, my children have been brought up from the day they're born with mathematics, that I'm talking about it, I'm thinking about it, I'm noticing them doing mathematical things. And then you've got parents who are working 3 jobs who, haven't had any chance at all to help their children to think mathematically at all. So you've got a huge range of students, but it's not that those students, it's not that my children are any better at maths than any other child. It just means they've had more experiences. So when they get to school, they can build on those experiences, where some children who haven't had that many experiences, they just start a little bit further back because they need to build those experiences. So it's not that they're not a maths person, it just means they need more experience. The parents' anxiety level is going to be an issue, because as I've talked about at the start, that if parents are anxious about maths, then that passes on to their children. And because they've spent so much time with their parents, and their parents, it's a stressful time anyway, homeschooling. So for parents, their anxiety is heightened about maths. So when we're not sure about the messages that they've heard when they come back to school, you might be trying to undo a lot of that. So just be aware of that. So encouraging parents wherever you can to be positive about maths, and for you as teachers to be positive about it. as well, and getting those messages across that mistakes grow your brain. If you're not making a mistake, you're not learning, okay? Talking about the word yet, I think, it's one of the most powerful words. Not I can't do that, I can't do that yet. Value thinking in different ways, and that's where, if you're having those discussions on, a classroom type of scenario, and you're getting different people's thinking and way of, for example, with chicken scramble, how did you sort your count? Oh, great. Okay. Did anyone do it in a different way? So valuing different ways of thinking, that there's not just one answer. Not focusing so much on speed. There is a need for fluency, absolutely, but we don't want them to be thinking that maths is all about speed. Okay. It's about deep thinking. If you're looking for some videos and resources to do with promoting a growth mindset, and maybe you're wanting some of the parents to watch these videos, they're really great videos. So look on youtube.org. I've got the screenshot up there. There's lots of mindset boosting videos that you could share with parents up there. I got my children to write a story about a child who had didn't have a growth mindset in maths. So that might be something that you could do for your older children, like the grade 2s, could be writing a story. My daughter wrote one called Miss Mindset. And so, yeah, just getting them thinking about the way that they're approaching their maths. The last one that I wanted to talk about today is the idea of reasoning and working cooperatively, because they won't have done a lot of that during their time in remote learning. So having something like a daily number talk is a great resource to have. So just putting something up as simple as 12 plus 6 for your grade 2s. It doesn't have to be a complicated, difficult equation. Just put it up and then say, okay, write in the chat, or write down how did you solve this problem, and then go around and hear how people solved that and what was their thinking. So we're getting them to do that reasoning, because that's probably something that they haven't done during remote learning. Which one doesn't belong? Alan's got the link for that as well. So which one doesn't belong? You can see that down in the bottom left-hand corner of the screen. Lots and lots of examples here, and you just put it up on the screen. And then you get children to suggest, okay, out of these 4 different things, in this case it's 4 equations, which one doesn't belong and why? And there's not just one answer. So somebody might say, 3 plus 9 doesn't belong there because all the others are tens facts. Great. Somebody else might say, 5 plus 5 doesn't belong there because it's the only doubles. Great. So they think of different ways of looking at it, and it's not just equations. There's all different ones. If you look on that website, so many, and it's that explaining their thinking and reasoning. Splat is another Steve Wybany resource, which Ellen has got the link to as well. You can see that down in the bottom, Splat through 10. So there's 4 different stages of splats. So it starts in, you can use them in prep, basically. So you've got the number 7 there, and the splat is over some of the dots, and the children have to discuss how many are under the splat, okay? And then it gets harder, and there's ones for, that would be completely suitable for your high-flying year 2s, okay? So check that out. It's a great resource. Check the clues is another resource that I love. If you've got these books by Paul Swan, I've put an example up on the screen. This is a year 2 one that is on the screen. So basically there's there's 4 cards, and the children have to collaborate to work out which is the particular number they're talking about. So in this one, no digits are the same. So then they go through and look at all the 6 numbers on the page next to it. And they work out, okay, well, it can't be this one. And then the digit 3 is in the thousands place, and they go through and they work out, okay, well, it can't be this one, and so they go through all them. You're meant to give 1 clue to each child, okay? So they work in a group of 4, and each of them have their own clue, and then they read it out one at a time. So there's collaboration, there's teamwork, lots and lots of discussion. So I think we really need to focus on those type of activities, because they won't have done a lot of that during remote learning. Counting videos. So this is just something else I did where I made the grade 1 children, I didn't make them, I asked them to make videos of a child making an error in counting, okay? And then they had to share it with others in the class and then discuss what that person had done wrong. So this was a video that I made as a hook for them to then go off and make their own videos. And it just really, instead of you standing at the front and saying what a good counter does, this gets them to pull that information out from what this child is doing incorrectly. So have a look at this video.
Can you tell me how many counters there are?
Yes. 1, 2, 3, 5, 6, 7.
How many are there?
7.
Okay, so then we discussed, what's that child done incorrectly, and they love nothing better than picking faults with someone they don't know. And then they went back and made their own videos, which, they loved doing. So that's a really great activity as well. So just on the last couple of slides now, so ideas for remote teaching. You can always play games, get them to play games with an imaginary friend. So they don't have to be games that they play by themselves. It could be a game that they play together, and they're playing, with their teddy or something. So it means that they get to do double the amount of maths in the game, which is fantastic. So that might be just something you want to try. And playing a game where everyone's partner is the teacher. So they've all got their individual cards, and you're their partner. You're everyone's partner. So that might be something you want to try as well. So if and when we're back in the classroom, lots of mixed ability group work. We don't want them to be put in their little groups and be, all the low kids together, all the high kids together, because they need to hear other people's ideas. They've been stuck with their own, basically with themselves. They need to hear other people's ideas. So lots of student talk. You may have to go through and reteach them independence in their mathematical thinking, because, they've probably got to the point where they're going, as soon as they don't understand anything, they just throw their hands up and, their parents are there to help them maybe. So that might be something you need to work on. Lots of hands-on activities when they get back, because they haven't had enough of that. Formative assessments, start with that, because you want to know where they're at so you can teach to that. They've had enough screens, so if you can keep no or low screen time when they get back, that I think is important. Have a think forward to the 2021 cohort. I know it's hard to get out of thinking about the children that you've got at the moment, but there's going to be implications for the ones coming into foundation next year. They won't have had kinder, so how are you going to change your teaching for next year? If you're passing your 2s on to grade 3, make sure you communicate with that teacher about what they have done and what they haven't done, because everyone's going to have to change the way they approach teaching next year as well. That idea of a spiral curriculum, so come back to things. So even if you taught something during remote learning, as I said, assume they didn't do it, you'll have to come back to it. Okay, so it's lots and lots of spiral curriculum and making connections. Decide upon those essential learnings and communicate that with leadership, future teachers, with parents. Decide what's important and make sure everyone is in on it, okay? So if you decide to focus on part, whole, make sure that you tell the teachers next year that that's what your focus has been on. Productive struggle. They need to, as I said, they probably have not done much struggling at all at home, which is great, because we've got to, you've got to make the lessons so that they're not hard for the students, but that's a skill that we're going to have to reteach them, how to struggle, that it's a good thing to struggle, that while they're struggling, they're learning. And don't feel you have to keep doing new things. You can play the same game every day for the whole week. In fact, that's a good thing to do, because they're developing their strategies. Like, for example, Shut the Box. I would play that every day for the whole week, because they're developing strategies. They're working on their part, whole. You don't have to do new things all the time. Just do the essential things well. That is the big message, I think. Okay, so if you're interested in keeping in contact, you can join my Facebook group, which is called Number Doctors for Educators. I'm on Instagram for parents, giving them ideas for parents of 3 to 6 year olds. So if you want to check that out, you're welcome to do that. You can email me if you've got any questions. Alan's got a link for a free ebook that I've made. So just my top 5 quick and easy numeracy games for teachers. So if you want to download that, Ellen will have the link for that. And that's all from me. I'm happy to answer any questions. Thank you all for being here. Yeah, and good luck. You're doing an amazing job. Keep it up. Yeah, happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Ange. I was trying to find your Facebook post while I was trying to get your Facebook link to your while you're like, Ellen's going to put the link up in a minute. I'm getting there. There we go. So in the chat box is the Facebook link and now the free book. So yes, please do stay on it. If you've got any questions, pop them in the chat box, or once numbers start dropping down, we might be able to have them on. You can stay on and have a face-to-face chat. So many practical ideas and about incorporating the critical components of number and F2, and it could be utilised either virtually or in that classroom. And I really loved some of the quite a few of the points that you made, but that when kids return back to school, that they wouldn't have had a lot of opportunity just to explore different people's ideas and to really extend their thinking. So lots and lots of opportunities to have mathematical talk and the sharing the strategies. That really connected with me. And the other big connection, which I made with your session today, is I'm also very passionate about the big ideas, and so focusing or decreasing the clutter of what's being taught to really harness in on a couple of really critical ideas for the rest of the year, and being upfront. I love this idea of being upfront with next year's teachers or wherever the kids are going, well, look, we spent the time really focusing on part whole, so that should be good, and then next year's group can pick up on something else. So I think that's such a critical idea about decreasing the complexity and really focusing on a few wonderful things that will really support their development going forward. So thanks, Ange. I really appreciate those thoughts. So we're getting lots of people popping in and saying thank you. Best PD I've ever done in remote learning. Good. How's that, Kate? From Kate Hawley, and thank yous. Fantastic session. Great to refresh. Focusing on it's popping up so fast, so we can see people popping in. Someone says say hi to Bridie for me, if that makes sense. Thanks, Ange.
Yeah.
Always so helpful. We'll absolutely keep the
yeah, Catherine, I will. Yeah. Catherine taught Bridie last year.
There you go. One of the most useful PDs. So please pop in your chat box, anything in your chat box.